war Christmas will be here before we know it. So, pulling on his clothes while dashing from elf to elf, he tucked the blankets roughly from their beds. What time is it, groaned one elf, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Later than it should be, barked Speedy. Hurry, we need to get to work. So once he was sure that none of the elves would creep back to bed, Speedy bounced downstairs. He left aboard his canoe and he set off across the snow. Reindeer scattered in all directions as he roared through the forest. And moments later, he was knocking on Santa's door. Good morning, Speedy, smiled Santa. You're even earlier than usual. Shh, don't tell the elves, laughed Speedy. While they were asleep, I wound the clock forward. No wonder they were so grumpy this morning. So Santa chuckled. Poor elves, he thought. No matter what they did, no matter how hard they worked, Speedy was sure to always work harder. He was always restless and always impatient. Speedy was the elf that made Christmas happen. So Santa tried to imagine what he would do without him. The thought was so alarming, it made him feel quite peculiar, and his legs began to wobble. Well then, he quivered, reaching for his favorite chair. What is the news? Very bad indeed, replied Speedy, but beaming with pleasure. We're in big trouble. See for yourself. So Santa took a thick sheet of papers from Speedy's hand and started to read. The more he read, the more he frowned. My word, he sighed when he had finished. This is terrible. Some children have been good, some have been wonderful, and some have been so unwell that they have been so good. So what are we going to do? So Speedy screwed up his eyes and thought for a moment. Don't worry, he soothed. We'll manage somehow. It's our job to make sure that every child who deserves a gift receives one. We have never failed yet, and I promise you we won't fail this time. But Speedy, he was in fact worried. He was very worried indeed. The elves were already working as hard as they could, and still there was so much to do. Good children could be a terrible nuisance, he muttered quietly, so that Santa wouldn't hear. If only there were more naughty children. So, when Speedy arrived at the toy factory, he was relieved to find everyone very busy. Toys stretched as far as he could see. Hundreds of elves scurrying about, running as fast as their legs would carry them. More bows, hollered one. Who do you think of my elves is asked that more bows be made? She is one of my special elves, and she wears blue. Has anybody met her yet?
Snowy Bowie.
Snowy Bowie. She's always asking for more bows. So, more bows had begged enough. They're on their way, cried Speedy, and rolling up his sleeves, puffing out his chest, he threw himself into a day's work. On the far side of the factory, letters poured from a chimney and gathered in a great pile on the floor. A dozen elves, carefully chosen for their ability to read between the lines, scooped them up and examined each one. Some letters were easy, they were neatly written, short and to the point. Others were long and smudged with ink, and these letters they did make the elves cross. They were always returned. Letters from good children, they went into a pile on one side, while letters from the naughty children went on to another. But the good pile soon reached all the way to the ceiling, while the letters in the naughty pile were very few indeed. Oh dear, groaned Speedy, rubbing his hands excitedly. What a wonderful busy Christmas we're having. But that night, the elves were so tired, they finished their supper and crawled into bed. When the last elf had started snoring, Speedy crept over to the clock He wound it forward another hour. "Sleep well, little elves," he whispered, "but not too well." The next day started like any other. Speedy woke first, ticked another day off his calendar, and rushed from elf to elf. "Surely it can't be morning already," yawned one, pulling the blankets over their head. "Of course it's morning," scolded Speedy. "Get out of bed, you lazy elf." Even Speedy felt tired that day, because more letters had arrived, hundreds more. There were letters for train sets, letters for dolls, letters for teddy bears, letters for bicycles. But by the end of the day, the elves had made more toys than ever before. "Thank you, everyone," clapped Speedy appreciatively. "See you in the morning." But no one replied. They were already fast asleep. So when Speedy awoke in the morning, he slipped out of bed. He tiptoed quietly to his calendar. "What snowballs!" he cried, almost jumping out of his pajamas. "It is Christmas Eve!" So frantically dashing from bed to bed, he ran to wake the elves. But it was no good. No matter how hard he tried, not one of them would stir. "It's not their fault," thought Speedy sadly. "I have asked too much of them. They're worn out, poor things. There's nothing more that they can do." So Speedy sat at the end of his bed, watching the clock as the hours ticked by. Each time he thought the elves were about to open their eyes, they would turn over and wriggle themselves further into the bed and start dreaming again. And the day crept over the horizon, and soon the room was filled with great winter lights. "Good morning," blinked an elf, taking Speedy by surprise and causing him to tumble off the bed. "What a wonderful sleep! Any chance of breakfast?" "I don't see why not," replied Speedy glumly. "There's no point hurrying now." It took a little while to serve everyone. The kettle whistled, the toaster popped, and the butter knife swished and swished. Trembling with impatience, Speedy waited for the last elf to clear his plate before pulling on his gloves and setting off in his skidoo. Santa knew there was a problem as soon as he saw Speedy's face. "Ho, ho, ho," he chuckled. "More bad news, I hope?" "As bad as it gets," replied Speedy. But this time, Speedy was not smiling. As Santa listened carefully as Speedy explained the problem, poor elf, he'd never expected the children to be so good. There just wasn't time to give each one a gift. "I see," said Santa, stroking his beard anxiously. "But before we cancel Christmas, why don't we visit the elves? Perhaps they will be able to help." "I doubt it," spat Speedy. "Last time I saw them, they were sipping tea and munching toast. They did not seem worried at all." So, when Santa and Speedy arrived at the toy factory, but it was an uproar, and they were astonished to find the elves having a party. A few of the oldest elves were singing Christmas carols, while the youngest, each clutching a bottle of fizzy pop, danced among the half-finished toys. And letters continued to fall from the fireplace, but nobody seemed to care. So, glancing nervously at Santa, Speedy walked over and stood before them. As he cleared his throat, everybody fell silent. "I have a confession to make," he sighed, "and you're all going to be very upset." "Oh, really?" said one elf, the smile fading from his face. "Whatever is the problem?" Speedy told them all about the clock and how he put it forward each day. He explained that putting a clock forward means you get less sleep. That was why the elves had felt so exhausted. That was why they couldn't stop yawning. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his lips trembling. "There were so many gifts to make this year, I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to help Santa." The elves all looked at each other, and suddenly, as if on cue, they all burst hard you work. You're not the only one that wants to be helpful. So Santa gently placed a hand on Speedy's shoulder, and turning to the elves, he wagged his finger sternly. I think you should tell Speedy everything, and I mean everything. Well, continued the elf, pausing only to take a long swig of pop. Each time you put the clocks forward, we waited for you to fall asleep. And then we crept over, we borrowed your pencil and ticked an extra day off the calendar. Speedy turned pale. His head spun as he struggled to understand. So today isn't Christmas Eve, he spluttered. Not for another week, grinned Santa. Thanks to everyone working so hard, you'll be finished in plenty of time. So Speedy skipped for joy, plucking his hat from his head and threw it high in the air. As he caught it, he narrowed his eyes, he puffed out his chest. Just look at all of those letters, he roared, pointing to the fireplace. Back to work, you lazy elves. And that is the story of Speedy Sam and him trying to trick his fellow elves. So thank you for helping me.